After this Alex Pretti shooting up there in Minnesota, there's a lot of misguided talk about the Second Amendment going on. This isn't a Second Amendment question. This isn't about gun rights. You know, the left wants it to go that way. That's why they have throwaway people like that. They recruit the crazy people, the lunatics, and they throw them out there as sacrificial lambs, knowing that one of them is going to screw up somewhere. Don't underestimate how cold and diabolical these people, these leaders of the left, the organizers are. They don't value the lives of these people that they're using. There's a reason these people are called useful idiots. They know that if they keep stirring all this stuff up, there's going to be mayhem and death that they can spin to their advantage. That's why they cater to the lunatics. They need their lunatics. These people are cannon fodder for the movement. That's all they are to the organizers. Actually, more attention needs to be paid to who is actually organizing this stuff and who is truly behind it, because right-wing media has fallen asleep on this. They've got it wrong. Many years ago, Glenn Beck brought up the issue of George Soros, and the guy is a creep. He's demonic. He's been a huge problem around the world. But Glenn Beck started pinning everything on Soros, and it caught on because it's easy. You know, the guy's ugly, he's a villain, he's the Lex Luthor of this organized crime story. However, Soros isn't the one doing all the organizing. I've done episodes before discussing who's really behind the organizing. Right-wing media still isn't picking it up. They're always so far behind. They wait until something happens. I mean, look at Nick Shirley. Look at what he exposed. This stuff was going on for years. Right-wing media missed it. The Republican Party missed it. Nobody was reporting on it. We were talking about it. We were calling the government an organized crime syndicate back in 2010 during the Tea Party era. But nobody picked up on it. But the real organizers behind this thing are tying all the protests in America to the same movement going on over there in Europe. This is an effort to make America ungovernable under Trump. Everything that these people are doing is to make us ungovernable. They think that if it's ungovernable and it gets chaotic, people will say the system isn't working and they'll be amenable to accepting something else. We have told you before who it is. I talked about my time that I spent spying on activities within the Democrat Party just to see how this organization of theirs worked. All these people in right-wing media that are telling you what's going on in the Democrat Party behind the scenes, they haven't been there. They sit behind their desk. They're news people. They work on their stories every day. I actually went into the Democrat Party. I attended the meetings. I went to their banquets. I went to their luncheons. I acted like I was a Democrat looking to become involved just so I could see how their process worked. And it is stunning. The organization is far beyond what conservative America seems to realize, and it's in your neighborhood. It's right down the street. It's touching people that you associate with in your daily life. It is everywhere. They are a fantastic organizational machine, and it's scary. This is all managed by people who have dedicated their lives to setting all of this up. They're not going to give it up. To them, it's a serious revolution. And believe me, the cost of a couple of their members dying, that's a small price to pay in their way of thinking. That's why they want dead people like Alex Pretti. A dead follower is not a casualty to them. It's a martyr. They need martyrs. It dials up the emotions. It takes it to another level where they want it to go. They want it to be ungovernable. A guy like Alex Pretti, he's a throwaway. These people are expendable. They don't lose a minute's sleep thinking about the loss of a guy like that. It means nothing to them. The people that are really behind it, they go unnoticed. Right-wing media doesn't understand this because they haven't been there. I have seen it. I'm telling you, it's not what we are being told. But it's not Soros. Soros is the front guy, the lightning rod, taking all of the hits, while the real organizers behind this are getting away unscathed. They're not even discussed. I've discussed them before. There's obvious proof of who is behind this, but nobody seems to pick up on it because of the fact they haven't heard it from their favorite right-wing media yet. We're not going to address this until people start addressing the people who are actually doing the organizing. I might have to do another episode about that again. But Alex Pretti was put up to this by an international organization that is not George Soros. George Soros bundles money from different sources and he dedicates some funding to all this. He doesn't even dedicate the mass amount of funding. But he's easy to remember. He's easy to hate. So he gets all the credit, and he gets credit for a lot of things that he's not behind, and that protects the people who are really doing it. But there's a lot that needs to be discussed about this, and the truth is, there's an awful lot of conservatives that are unfortunately getting it wrong about the Second Amendment. As always, when these events come up that involve a gun and some major national news story, a lot always comes up about the Second Amendment and gun rights and what's allowed and what isn't. A lot of people say that all gun laws are illegal. Well, that's not true. It's not unconstitutional to have limits on the guns that people can own. And we're going to explain all this. There's 5 reasons here why this is not a Second Amendment issue. If you're going to discuss it, it needs to be discussed with facts. And one thing I always promise about this channel, I named it What They Don't Say for a reason, because there's a lot that needs to be said that isn't being said. Everything on this show you can always back up either with current events, history, or directly from our Constitution. You just got to be clear about it. First of all, the battle's about carrying a gun, where you can carry one. You don't decide that individually or on the street. If you've got a problem with the laws and the limits in the city, state, or county where you live, the battle for that is in the courts and the legislature, or your city council, or your county board, wherever the restrictions are coming from. That's where the battle is. And you can't just say, well, the Second Amendment in my interpretation says this or that. It's not up to your interpretation. Society is run by laws. If they've got the wrong laws, there's a pathway for changing it. Remember that. In our Constitution, they built in a pathway for changing our actual Constitution. They knew that adjustments were going to have to be made as things progressed. So let's just remember that. You don't get to interpret the Second Amendment yourself, no matter what you feel. Once you do that based on your feelings, you're just giving an emotional response, not a technical, legal, or constitutional response. Okay, with that out of the way, a lot of people are saying, well, there was no gun control laws until the 1940s or until the 60s. That's not true. The arguments go back at least 200 years that I know of. In the times of the Old West, the days of Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok, they had gun restrictions then because they found out if you didn't restrict the guns, then everybody would get together, they would get drunk, and all of a sudden the guns would come out, 11 o'clock at night over a poker table, a girl, a spilled drink. When I was young and dumb, I had my wild years. I hung out in some places where there was an awful lot of fights going on. But, back then, for some reason, people had rules about the fights. You took it outside. You didn't bust up the place you wanted to be at. You didn't have any room in there anyway. You take it outside, and then afterwards people could go back inside, and that was it. That was the end of it. We didn't even think about someone pulling a gun back then. It didn't happen. If you took a beating, you took your beating. If it got out of hand, the crowd would stop it. But nobody even thought about the guns. Well, now we're in an age where the guns do come out. And the problem is there's always nutcases. You cannot make laws that are just tailored to the nuts because it doesn't work that way. The laws have to fit everybody, and once in a while, someone can get a permit and then they go nuts. Or in a state where you don't have to have a permit, the same thing can happen. That's why we used to have laws about inciting violence. There were criminal penalties for it. This is what makes it so dangerous about guys like Waltz and Fry. These people are inciting violence. They're encouraging rebellion against the government, knowing that their craziest people are hearing this. They want someone to act like Pretti did. They're recruiting violent nuts. They're giving them the marching orders. You know, back when the Muslims were attacking us all the time, the first question that came out of all the lefties was, where did they get radicalized? Well, why isn't anybody asking where these people are getting radicalized now? We've got public officials telling them to go do this stuff. Sedition is a crime. Under a lot of administrations in the past, it would have been punishable. Why this administration is not charging these officials with sedition and inciting violence is beyond me. That's another argument. But the problem is when you've got guns and people are all fired up emotionally and they've been radicalized, bad things are going to happen. That's why they do it. They want these bad things. Again, they want America to be ungovernable under Trump. It's the same thing they're doing over in Europe. They want Europe to be ungovernable. This is not an American problem. It is all of Western society. In America, the Second Amendment is being tossed into the mix because it's an important part of the fabric of our country, and it's an emotional debate, and they want that emotion stirred up. When you've got guns and when you've got humans, bad things are going to happen. Without the gun, it's going to happen with a hammer or a knife. That's all well known. But during the days of the Old West, Wyatt Earp was famous for making a law where when the cowboys came into town, they had to surrender their guns upon arrival. It caused a lot of trouble back then because a lot of them just refused to do it. Wyatt Earp took them away. They disarmed the people because they knew what was going to happen because it was wild and crazy times and everybody was going to be drinking. The lawmen and citizens of the time knew that some controls were necessary because there were too many people getting killed. These were people who lived and died by the gun. They were hardcore gun rights people. They had their own. They carried their own. They were experts at it. They had grown up with it. They valued their own right to carry a gun, but they knew there were situations where it wasn't feasible. So now the gun control laws are not new. Gun restrictions are not new. Heroes of the Old West enforce them. So that argument, that's just dead in the water. No, it's not something new. One of the worst misinterpretations of the Second Amendment, these people who say, well, because of the Second Amendment, all gun laws are unconstitutional. That's not true at all. The Second Amendment says you have the right to keep and bear arms. It doesn't say that you've got the right to pack and use any type of weapon that mankind can devise. You can't walk around with a fully automatic 50 cal machine gun strapped to a garden cart. Nobody wants. Just because a weapon is made doesn't mean that you've got a right to it because of the Second Amendment. You can keep and bear arms, but you don't need a belt-feed fully automatic gun to fulfill the Second Amendment. It's reasonable to have limits. If you disagree with that, well, sorry, you're wrong. Just imagine the street gangs and the mayhem that we'd have if they had full access to all the military weapons that the people who misunderstand the Second Amendment think that we should possess. Now, another thing that comes to mind from this Alex Pretti incident, I'm constantly hearing conservatives saying, let them start a civil war. We've got all the guns. They don't even have guns. What are they doing? Yes, they have guns. I've been telling people this all of my adult life. They have guns. I've worked in union factories all over the country. I travel around as a consultant. In all these union factories, they were stacked to the eaves with employees who were diehard Democrats, a lot of lefties, and they were union. The carpenters union is full of them. The electrical unions are full of them. They are Democrats. They shoot. They hunt. They have guns. There are an awful lot of Democrats, a high percentage of Democrats that have guns and use guns, and they do value the Second Amendment. They just want to restrict yours. Remember that. But the idea that Democrats don't have guns, does Alex Pretti make the point? Are people still going to say this? Time and time again we see Democrats with guns. Then there's a branch of conservatives that come right back saying, they don't have any guns, they're just stupid. Well, it's kind of crazy to say they don't have guns now, isn't it? This guy had even gone through the process of getting the training and getting a permit. Yes, Democrats have guns. Get that notion out of the public conversation. Personally, I feel that anybody that's a responsible, intelligent person that knows that they would use a gun when necessary should be carrying one. If you're not sure you're going to use it, you better not have it with you because it's probably going to wind up in their hands. If you pull a gun, if you point it, you better be ready to pull that trigger because otherwise, if it's not that kind of situation, you shouldn't have pulled it in the first place. They aren't for show. People who hesitate have them taken away. It's got to be somebody that's responsible enough to know when they have to pull the trigger. But there's another aspect to this Second Amendment that comes up in all of these discussions, and it's a logical point to make, and that is our founders did not just come back from a deer hunt when they wrote the Second Amendment guaranteeing our right to self-defense. They just won a major revolution. Yes, they did, and they took their guns back home. They didn't take the cannons home, okay? Let's not forget that point. Our ancestors from the Civil War, when they went back home, they took their guns. They just saved the nation. They didn't take the bombs. They didn't take the cannons. They didn't take the Gatling guns back to the farms. They took weapons they could use for self-defense at home, among whatever other use they had for them. Yes, our founders guaranteed the second because of the importance of controlling a rogue government. We have a lot of good people in the military. We get a rogue government that starts killing people, like the actions that inspired our revolution in the first place. If we get to that point, I completely trust the men and women of our military to side with us. We will have access to those weapons through them. They will make them available. They will use them. They will get them available. We will have armed people with the means to get the job done. I have total confidence in that. We will have the weapons available should that need arise. But you don't need them available on the streets. That's just not feasible. If you have those in the homes, then the homes get broken into. Anything can be stolen. You really don't want all this stuff in the hands of the street gangs. They've got enough guns already. I've heard that argument a lot. Well, we've got to have it for a rogue government. I've never heard anybody finish and describe what limits are rational. The people who say there shouldn't be any limits of any kind, where do you draw the line between bazookas, 50 cal again, the 50 cal auto feed? Where do you draw the line on what's rational? What do you want to risk being out in public and getting into the wrong hands? Those people never discuss that. Yeah, there has to be reasonable limits. Another thing too, though, that comes to mind with this is there's situations that a person shouldn't be carrying a gun in. It was stupid of him to go strapped up and fully loaded with all the extra mags doing what he did. But the guy was a kook, okay? We know that. But when they do talk about limits, limiting carrying in a protest, where do you draw that line? Nobody has defined where a protest becomes a dangerous situation. Where do you cross the line between a protest and a revolt or a riot? How do you make a law that suddenly disarms everybody when a situation escalates? You can't do that. So the nation has not decided what to do in that type of situation. And the truth is, if we just had decency, if people were just more sensible, we wouldn't even need it. Unfortunately, the world's a crazy place, and it's getting a whole lot crazier, a whole lot faster, and we've got a lot of people on the left that are stirring it up deliberately. And that's one of the reasons they do it. They want to start the debate about the Second Amendment again. It's another one of their attempts to find ways to limit it. There are reasonable limits to the Second Amendment. We don't need any more right now. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that this Alex Pretti shooting or the good shooting, any of these shootings, they aren't Second Amendment questions. These people were committing crimes. Alex Pretti was committing a crime. He was a nut That's generally agreed upon by everyone that knew him. Don't believe that this is a Second Amendment issue, because it's not. There's no argument that can prove that it is. We got to get this right. We don't need to be misled into an argument that doesn't even apply to this situation just because they want to use the Second Amendment to make us more divided. We got to get it right. And if we do, maybe God will continue to bless this great country of ours. Thanks for listening.